The overhead lights of Whitmore Financial Partners hummed their usual fluorescent tune as I settled into my desk at 6:47 a.m. 13 minutes before anyone else would arrive. 13 minutes of peace before the whispers, the glances, the carefully constructed silences that followed me through every corridor of this building. My name is Ava Mitchell. I am 31 years old and I have worked harder than anyone in this office for the past 4 years. Not that anyone would know it by looking at the org chart. Executive Assistant to Richard Caldwell, Chief Financial Officer. A title that sounds important until you realize it means I do everything while he takes every credit. I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mother and 2 younger brothers. My father left when I was 7, walked out one Tuesday morning and never came back. Mama worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She cleaned houses for white families on the Upper East Side during the day, waited tables at a diner in the evenings, and did overnight shifts at a nursing home on weekends. I watched her hands crack and bleed from chemicals. I watched her back bend a little more each year. And I swore to myself that I would build a different life. I put myself through community college, then transferred to a state school on scholarships and student loans I'm still paying off. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in accounting. I passed the CPA exam on my first try. And yet here I am, 4 years into this job, still fetching coffee and scheduling meetings for a man who cannot spell reconciliation without my help. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows as I powered on my laptop. Mr. Caldwell had asked me to prepare a presentation for a board meeting scheduled for Friday. He'd been vague about the details. He always was. But he'd left his company laptop on my desk with a sticky note. Pull Q3 numbers, make it look good. Make it look good. The unofficial motto of my entire career here. I opened the laptop and navigated to the financial folders. Q3 reports, expense summaries, budget allocations. Everything seemed normal at first glance. But as I scrolled deeper into the files, something caught my eye. A folder labeled RC Personal, buried 3 levels deep in the directory structure. I hesitated. This was clearly not meant for my eyes. But something, call it intuition, call it the instinct that comes from years of watching people who think they're smarter than you, made me click. What I found made my blood run cold. Wire transfers, dozens of them, all originating from company accounts, all ending in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The amounts varied, $5,000 here, $15,000 there, but when I tallied them up, my hands started shaking. $100,000. Richard Caldwell had stolen $100,000 from Whitmore Financial Partners. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was evidence of embezzlement. Clear, undeniable evidence. And it was sitting right here on my desk. For a long moment, I didn't move. I couldn't move. Because I knew, with the absolute certainty that comes from being a black woman in corporate America, that this discovery would not play out the way it should. I knew that if I reported this, if I walked into HR or the CEO's office with this information, the first question wouldn't be about Richard Caldwell. The first question would be about me. How did you access this file? Why were you snooping? Are you sure you understood what you saw? I've seen it happen before. 3 years ago, a black woman in the marketing department raised concerns about her supervisor's inappropriate behavior. By the end of the month, she was gone, restructured, out of her position. The supervisor got promoted 6 months later. I carefully copied the relevant files to a flash drive, then closed the folder and erased my digital footprints as best I could. Whatever I was going to do with this information, I needed time to think. I needed a strategy. "You're here early." The voice made me jump. I turned to find Benjamin Whitmore standing in the doorway of the executive suite, a cup of coffee in each hand. He was the CEO's son, recently appointed as Director of Strategic Partnerships after spending 5 years building his own tech startup in California. 39 years old, tall, with kind eyes that seemed perpetually curious. Unlike most of the executives here, he actually knew my name. "I could say the same about you." "Mr. Whitmore," I replied, quickly minimizing the windows on my screen. He smiled, a genuine smile, not the performative kind I'd grown accustomed to in this building. "Please, it's Benjamin." Mr. Whitmore is my father. He walked over and set one of the coffee cups on my desk. Oat milk latte, no sugar. I noticed that's what you usually get from the cafe downstairs. I stared at the cup, then at him. In 4 years at this company, no one had ever brought me coffee. I was the one who fetched coffee for others. Thank you, I said, hoping my voice didn't betray my surprise. I wanted to talk to you. Actually. He pulled up a chair and sat across from me, completely disregarding the invisible social hierarchy that should have sent him to his corner office. I've been reviewing departmental reports, and I noticed something interesting. The quarterly analysis that went to the board last month, the one that saved us from a disastrous investment in that tech acquisition, that was your work. Wasn't it? I felt my spine stiffen. Mr. Caldwell presented that analysis. I know he presented it. I'm asking who did the actual work. The directness of his question caught me off guard. I'd spent years learning to navigate conversations like these, to deflect credit and avoid the appearance of overstepping. But something in Benjamin's gaze told me he already knew the answer. I compiled the data, I admitted, and I may have refined some of the conclusions. You identified a discrepancy in the acquisition target's reported revenues that our entire M&A team missed. That's not refinement, that's exceptional analytical work. He leaned forward. Why are you still in an assistant role? Because I'm black. Because I'm a woman. Because I come from nothing and people like me aren't supposed to rise above a certain level. Because every time I've applied for a promotion, I've been told I need more experience, more patience, more time, but I didn't say any of that. Instead, I offered the practiced response. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn in my current position. Benjamin's eyes narrowed slightly as if he could hear all the words I wasn't saying. That's a diplomatic answer. I was hoping for an honest one. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened, and Richard Caldwell strode onto the floor. He was a large man, red-faced and perpetually sweating despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. When he saw Benjamin sitting at my desk, his expression flickered through several emotions: surprise, confusion, then something that looked almost like fear. Benjamin, I didn't know you were coming in early. I would have... Just having a conversation with Ava here, Benjamin said smoothly, rising from his chair. She was telling me about the Q3 analysis. Impressive work. Richard's face went even redder. Yes, well, Ava is a valuable member of my team. I've been mentoring her closely. He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Haven't I, Ava? Of course, Mr. Caldwell, I replied, my voice neutral. Benjamin looked between us for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. I'll let you get to work. Ava, I'd like to continue our conversation sometime. Perhaps over lunch? I glanced at Richard, who was staring at me with barely concealed hostility. I'd like that. After Benjamin left, Richard turned on me. What were you telling him? He asked about the Q3 analysis, sir. I told him you presented it to the board. That's right, I presented it. Don't forget who you work for, Ava. He snatched his laptop from my desk and stalked toward his office. And I need those presentation slides by noon. No mistakes. I watched him go, my hand instinctively moving to the flash drive in my pocket. The weight of what I'd discovered pressed down on me like a physical force. $100,000, evidence of a crime, and I was the only one who knew. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of spreadsheets and emails. But my mind kept returning to the files on that flash drive and to the unexpected encounter with Benjamin Whitmore. His interest in my work was strange. Executives at his level didn't notice assistants, let alone bring them coffee and ask probing questions. Part of me wondered if it was some kind of test or worse, a trap. But another part of me, the part I usually kept locked away, wondered if it was something else entirely. If, perhaps, not everyone in this building saw me as invisible. At noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Lunch? There's a quiet cafe on 52nd, my treat. Benjamin. I stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct I'd developed over 31 years of navigating white spaces told me to decline, to stay in my lane, to not attract attention. But I was tired of staying in my lane. I was tired of being invisible. I typed back, I'll be there in 20 minutes. The cafe was tucked away on a side street, the kind of place that survived on word of mouth rather than foot traffic. Benjamin was already there when I arrived, seated at a corner table with 2 menus in front of him. I took the liberty of ordering sparkling water, he said as I sat down. But please get whatever you'd like. I ordered a salad, not because I wanted one, but because I'd learned long ago that black women are judged for everything they put in their mouths. Benjamin ordered a burger and didn't seem to notice or care about the optics. I owe you an apology, he said once the waiter left. I ambushed you this morning and that wasn't fair. I've been back at the company for 3 months and I'm still trying to understand how things actually work around here. The official version and the real version are different. They usually are. He nodded. I spent 5 years building something from scratch. I hired people based on what they could do, not who they knew. Coming back here, seeing how talent gets overlooked because it doesn't fit a certain... He paused, searching for the right word. Mold. It bothers me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this wealthy white man, born into privilege I couldn't even imagine, genuinely cared about meritocracy and fairness, but I'd been burned too many times. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Benjamin was quiet for a moment. Because I think you're brilliant, and I think you're wasted in your current role. And I think there's a reason for that, and the reason isn't your capability. The directness of his words hit me like a wave. No one in this world, no one, had ever called me brilliant to my face. Not my teachers, not my professors, not any of the supervisors who'd benefited from my work over the years. To hear it from him, in this quiet cafe, felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. You don't know anything about me, I managed. I know you caught a $12 million discrepancy that our entire team missed. I know you've been an assistant for 4 years despite being overqualified by at least 2 titles. And I know that Richard Caldwell looked terrified when he saw me talking to you this morning. He leaned forward. What I don't know is why. And I suspect you do. The flash drive burned in my pocket. I could tell him everything. I could show him the evidence, let him take it to his father, let the chips fall where they may. But if I'd learned anything in 31 years, it was that nothing in this world came without a price, and I wasn't ready to pay it yet. I appreciate your interest, Mr. Whitmore, Benjamin, but I need to get back to the office. Mr. Caldwell is expecting those slides. He didn't try to stop me. Will you at least think about what I said, about your potential here? I stood, gathering my things. I'll think about it. As I walked back to the office, I felt his eyes on me the entire way. And despite everything I knew about the world, despite every lesson I'd learned about trusting white people in positions of power, I found myself hoping he was different. 2 weeks passed after my lunch with Benjamin Whitmore. 2 weeks of stolen glances across conference rooms, of brief conversations by the coffee machine, of text messages that started professional and gradually became something else entirely. Benjamin. That report you sent Caldwell was exceptional. You should be presenting it yourself. Ava. Thank you. That's not really how things work here. Benjamin. Maybe it's time to change how things work. I told myself I was being careful. I told myself I was just networking, building an ally in a company where I had none. But late at night, lying in my small apartment in Harlem, I couldn't deny that something was shifting inside me. Something that felt dangerous. Meanwhile, I continued to investigate. Every evening after work, I pored over the files I'd copied from Richard's laptop. The embezzlement scheme was more sophisticated than I'd initially realized. He wasn't just stealing money. He was hiding it behind fake vendor payments, ghost employees, and inflated expense reports. The offshore account was just the final destination in a complex web of fraud that stretched back at least 2 years. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I couldn't go to HR. The head of human resources, Patricia Lawson, was Richard's sister-in-law. I couldn't go to the board. I was a nobody, an assistant who would be dismissed before I finished my first sentence. And I couldn't go to Benjamin, not yet. I needed to understand his motives. I needed to know if he was really as different as he seemed. On Friday of the second week, I got my answer. The company was hosting a charity gala at the Metropolitan Club. One of those exclusive Manhattan institutions where membership required the right last name and the right skin color. I wasn't invited, of course. Assistants rarely were. But Benjamin had arranged for me to attend as his guest. "It's important for you to be there," he'd said. "The board will be present. Networking opportunities." What he didn't say, but what I understood, was that he wanted to be seen with me, that he was making a statement. I arrived at the venue in a dress I couldn't afford, a simple black gown I'd charged to a credit card already maxed out from student loans. My hair was pulled back in a sleek updo, and I wore my mother's pearl earrings, the only valuable thing she'd ever owned. The moment I stepped through the doors, I felt every eye in the room swivel toward me. I was used to being stared at. Being a black woman in white spaces meant existing under constant surveillance. But this was different. These stares carried weight, judgment, assessment. "Ava." Benjamin materialized at my side, his hand resting lightly on my lower back. "You look stunning." "I look like I don't belong here," I murmured. "You belong wherever you decide you belong." Easy for him to say. Easy for a man born into wealth and whiteness to dismiss the boundaries that governed my entire existence. But I didn't voice that thought. Instead, I let him guide me through the crowd, introducing me to board members and executives as a rising star in our financial operations. The lies fell from his lips so easily that I almost believed them myself. We were halfway through the evening when I saw her. Victoria Ashford, heiress to a pharmaceutical fortune and, as I would soon learn, Benjamin's ex-fiancée. She was everything I was not. Blonde, blue-eyed, draped in diamonds that cost more than my entire net worth. When she spotted Benjamin and me together, her perfect features twisted into something ugly. "Benjamin, darling." She glided over, air-kissing his cheeks while her eyes cut toward me. I didn't realize the company was bringing in outside help for the gala. "Ava is a colleague," Benjamin said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "And a friend." "How progressive of you." Victoria's smile was a weapon. "Tell me, Ava, is it? What exactly do you do at Whitmore Partners?" "I'm an executive assistant to the CFO." "Oh, how lovely. Fetching coffee and managing calendars. Such important work." She turned to Benjamin with exaggerated concern. "You know, Ben, people will talk. After everything that happened between us, showing up with your assistant might send the wrong message. The only wrong message here is the one you're sending right now." Benjamin's hand tightened on my back. "Excuse us." He steered me away, but the damage was done. I could feel the whispers spreading through the room like wildfire. I could see the knowing looks, the raised eyebrows, the barely concealed sneers. "I should go," I said. "Ava, don't let her—" This was a mistake. I pulled away from him, my chest tight with humiliation. "I don't belong in your world, Benjamin, and pretending I do doesn't help either of us." I left before he could respond, practically running through the gilded halls of the Metropolitan Club toward the exit. I was almost at the door when a voice stopped me cold. "Miss Mitchell." I turned to find Harold Whitmore, Benjamin's father, and the CEO of Whitmore Financial Partners, watching me from the shadow of a marble column. He was an imposing man, silver-haired and steel-eyed, with the kind of presence that silenced rooms. "Mr. Whitmore." I forced my voice to remain steady. "I was just leaving." I noticed. He walked toward me, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. "I also noticed my son spending the entire evening at your side, introducing you to the board, looking at you like—" He stopped, his expression hardening. "Do you know what you're doing, Miss Mitchell?" "I'm not sure what you mean, sir." "I think you do." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "My son is kind-hearted. Sometimes too kind-hearted. He sees a struggling young woman and he wants to help. That's admirable. But kindness can be exploited. I'm not exploiting anyone. Maybe not intentionally, but surely you understand how this looks. An assistant, a woman of your background, getting close to the heir of a billion-dollar company. People will assume the worst. They'll say you're a gold digger, a manipulator. They'll say much worse things." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Is that really what you want for your career? Every nerve in my body was screaming. I wanted to tell him that his son was the one who sought me out, that I hadn't asked for any of this, that I had spent my entire life fighting for scraps while people like him hoarded every opportunity. But I also knew that this man could destroy my career with a single phone call. So I swallowed my rage and said simply, "I understand your concern, sir. It won't happen again." "Good." He smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "We all have our place in this world, Miss Mitchell. The sooner you accept yours, the better off you'll be." I didn't respond. I just walked away, my heels clicking against the marble, my mother's pearls suddenly feeling very heavy around my neck. That night I sat in my apartment and cried for the first time in years. I cried for my mother, who had worked herself to the bone so I could have a better life. I cried for every door that had been closed in my face, every opportunity stolen, every time I'd been made to feel less than. And I cried for the foolish part of me that had dared to hope things might be different. When the tears were done, I pulled out the flash drive. Enough was enough. Over the next week, I built my case. I cross-referenced the fraudulent transactions with Richard's calendar, showing that he was in the office when the transfers were initiated. I traced the shell companies back to his personal attorney. I documented the ghost employees and found that their salaries were being deposited into accounts he controlled. It was meticulous work, patient work, the kind of work I'd been trained to do in the shadows while men like Richard Caldwell took credit. But this time the credit would be mine. I was deep in the documents on Thursday evening when my phone buzzed. Benjamin, can we talk? I need to apologize. For Victoria. For my father. For everything. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to tell him exactly what his father had said. Watch the guilt flicker across his privileged face. But another part of me, the part that had seen the way he looked at me, the part that had felt something shift during those quiet cafe conversations, wasn't ready to let go. "Ava, there's something I need to show you first. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Benjamin. Name the place. We met at a small park in Harlem, far from the prying eyes of Whitmore Financial. Benjamin arrived in a simple sweater and jeans, looking nothing like the heir to a billion-dollar empire. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. "I know I don't deserve it." "You're right. You don't." I sat down on a bench, leaving space between us. "Your father told me to know my place. Your ex-fiancé called me outside help. And you just stood there. I tried to defend you. You tried. But trying isn't enough, not in my world." I looked at him, really looked at him, searching for the truth beneath the charm. "Do you have any idea what it's like to walk into a room and know that everyone there sees you as less than? To have to work twice as hard just to be considered half as good? To love someone who can never fully understand your pain?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. Love. I hadn't meant to say it, hadn't even admitted it to myself until that moment. Benjamin's eyes widened. "Ava, I'm not finished." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "Before we talk about whatever this is between us, you need to see something. Richard Caldwell has been embezzling money from your company, over $100,000. I have the evidence right here." His face went pale. "What?" I walked him through everything. The wire transfers, the shell companies, the ghost employees. He listened in silence, his expression shifting from shock to anger to something that looked almost like admiration. "You figured this out on your own," he said when I finished, "without any help, without any resources. I've spent my whole career figuring out problems that other people created. This one just happens to have a paper trail." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "I'm sorry. For my father. For Victoria. For every person in that company who has ever made you feel like you don't belong. You deserve better than this. Better than all of it. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, it's..." He struggled for words. "It's awe. You're the strongest person I've ever met. And if you'll let me, I want to help you bring Caldwell down, the right way, where you get the credit you deserve." I looked at our intertwined hands, his white, mine black, and felt the enormity of what he was offering. Not salvation, not rescue, partnership. "Your father won't stand for it," I said. "He'll protect Caldwell. They golf together, for God's sake." "Let me worry about my father." Benjamin squeezed my hand. "The question is, do you trust me?" I should have said no. Every survival instinct I'd developed over 31 years screamed at me to pull away, to protect myself, to go it alone like I always had. But I was tired of being alone. "I trust you," I whispered. And for the first time in my life, I meant it. The boardroom of Whitmore Financial Partners smelled like old money and older secrets. Mahogany panels lined the walls, imported from forests that no longer existed. The conference table was a single slab of black marble, polished to a mirror sheen. 12 leather chairs surrounded it, each worth more than my monthly salary. In 3 hours, I would either destroy my career or save it. There was no middle ground. Benjamin and I had spent the past 2 weeks preparing. We'd compiled the evidence into an airtight presentation. Bank records, transaction logs, email correspondence, and, the crown jewel, a recorded phone conversation in which Richard Caldwell explicitly discussed the offshore accounts with his attorney. Benjamin had obtained it through means he wouldn't fully explain, and I'd decided not to ask. Some questions didn't need answers. The plan was simple. Benjamin had called an emergency board meeting under the pretense of discussing a potential acquisition. Once the directors were assembled, I would present the evidence of Caldwell's embezzlement. Benjamin would second my findings and call for an immediate investigation. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything could go wrong. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., 3 hours before the meeting. My hands were steady, but my heart felt like a hummingbird trapped in a cage. I wore my best suit, a navy blue blazer and matching pants I'd bought at a consignment shop in Chelsea. Professional. Forgettable. The armor of a woman who'd learned to blend in. Benjamin texted at 8:15. "Board members arriving. Father suspects something. Stay strong. Stay strong." Easy words for a man who'd never been weak. I spent the next hour reviewing my notes in an empty conference room. The door opened at 9:30, and Patricia Lawson, the head of HR, walked in. Richard Caldwell's sister-in-law. Her face was a mask of professional concern. "Ava, I was hoping to catch you before the meeting." "Mrs. Lawson," I kept my voice neutral. "Is there something I can help you with?" She sat down across from me, folding her manicured hands on the table. "I've heard some troubling rumors about you and Benjamin Whitmore, about inappropriate conduct." My blood turned to ice. "I don't know what you're referring to." "Don't you?" Her smile was poison dipped in honey. "The gala, the private meetings, the texts." She leaned forward. "Richard told me you've been snooping through his files, making copies of confidential documents. If I were to launch an investigation, then launch one." The words came out before I could stop them. "Investigate me. Investigate everything. Because I promise you, Mrs. Lawson, you won't like what you find." Her composure cracked just for a moment. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating a fact. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting to attend." I stood and walked past her, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. She was going to warn Richard. She was going to sabotage everything. I needed to find Benjamin, needed to tell him that our plan was compromised. Ava. Benjamin was waiting for me in the hallway, his face tense. "My father knows. I don't know how, but he knows. He's going to try to stop this." Patricia just confronted me. She accused me of inappropriate conduct, snooping through files. "They're trying to discredit you before you can speak." "Then we need to move faster." I grabbed his arm. "Get the board into that room, now, before they can regroup." The next 30 minutes were a blur. Benjamin herded the directors into the boardroom while I set up the presentation equipment. Harold Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his steel eyes tracking my every movement. Richard Caldwell took his usual seat, looking smug and satisfied. He'd clearly been briefed on the plan to destroy me. Victoria Ashford was there too, seated in the gallery reserved for major shareholders. Her presence was a knife in my chest, but I refused to let it show. Ladies and gentlemen, Benjamin began, taking his position at the front of the room. Thank you for gathering on such short notice. I've called this meeting because we have a serious matter to discuss. A matter that affects the financial integrity of this company. Harold Whitmore's voice cut through the room like a blade. Before we proceed, I have concerns about the legitimacy of this meeting. My son has been compromised by a personal relationship that clouds his judgment. Father, I'm not finished. Harold turned to face the board. I have evidence that Benjamin Whitmore has engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee. An employee who has been accessing confidential files without authorization. An employee who, I believe, is attempting to manipulate my son for personal gain. Every eye in the room swiveled toward me. I felt the weight of their judgment, their assumptions, their ready-made conclusions about who I was and what I wanted. Richard Caldwell smirked. Victoria Ashford smiled. And something inside me snapped. You want to talk about personal gain? My voice rang out clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs of the board. Let's talk about personal gain. Let's talk about $100,000 stolen from this company over the past 2 years. Let's talk about shell corporations and offshore accounts. Let's talk about ghost employees and inflated vendor payments. I walked to the front of the room and took the presentation controller from Benjamin's hand. My name is Ava Mitchell. I've worked at this company for 4 years. I have a bachelor's degree in accounting and a CPA certification. I've saved this company over $50 million through my analytical work that has consistently been credited to others. I clicked the first slide. Bank records appeared on the screen. Wire transfers highlighted in red. This is a record of unauthorized transfers from Whitmore Financial's operating accounts to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. The entity is a shell corporation with no legitimate business purpose. Its sole function is to receive stolen funds. Click. Another slide. Email correspondence. These are communications between Richard Caldwell and his personal attorney, discussing how to structure the transfers to avoid detection. Note the dates. They coincide exactly with the wire transfer records. Click. The recorded phone call began to play. Richard's voice filled the room. Make sure the next transfer goes through the secondary account. The auditors are getting nosy. We need to be more careful. The color drained from Richard's face. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is fabricated. She's lying. Sit down. Richard. Harold Whitmore's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. I continued, slide after slide, building an irrefutable case. Ghost employees whose salaries flowed into Richard's personal accounts. Vendor payments for services never rendered. A systematic, years-long scheme to defraud the company. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Victoria Ashford spoke, her voice dripping with disdain. This is absurd. You expect us to believe that an assistant, she spat the word like a curse, uncovered something our entire finance team missed? This is clearly a setup. She's sleeping with Benjamin to get ahead, and now she's manufacturing evidence to destroy anyone who stands in her way. Actually, Benjamin stepped forward. Every piece of evidence Ava presented has been independently verified by an external forensic accounting firm. I hired them 2 weeks ago. Their report is in the folders in front of you. The sound of folders opening rippled through the room. Page 7, I said. You'll find a full reconciliation of the fraudulent transactions. Page 12 contains the forensic analysis of the Shell Corporation's ownership structure, which traces directly back to Mr. Caldwell. Page 15. Enough. Harold Whitmore held up his hand. His face had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Richard, is this true? Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The smugness was gone, replaced by naked terror. There must be some mistake. I can explain. The evidence is clear. Father? Benjamin's voice was firm. Richard has been stealing from us for years, and he would have continued if Ava hadn't had the courage to come forward. Courage? Victoria laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. She's not courageous. She's calculating. She saw an opportunity to manipulate Benjamin, and she took it. This is what women like her do. They use their... Victoria. Benjamin turned to face her, and something in his expression made her fall silent. You need to leave. Now. Benjamin, darling. I'm only trying to protect you from... I said leave. The security guards appeared at the door as if summoned by magic. Victoria's face contorted with rage, but she gathered her things and swept out of the room, shooting me a look of pure hatred as she passed. Harold Whitmore stood slowly, his movements heavy with the weight of betrayal. Richard, you're terminated immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Your access has already been revoked. He paused. Our legal team will be in touch regarding criminal charges. Richard tried to speak, tried to protest, but the words wouldn't come. 2 security guards flanked him and led him toward the door. As he passed me, he stopped and hissed, You'll regret this. You don't know who you're dealing with. Actually, I said quietly, I think I do. After Richard was gone, Harold turned to face me. The boardroom had emptied of everyone except the 3 of us, Harold, Benjamin, and me. Miss Mitchell. His voice was softer now, stripped of its earlier hostility. It appears I owe you an apology. You owe me more than that, Mr. Whitmore, but an apology is a start. He nodded slowly. I underestimated you. I made assumptions based on... He trailed off, unable or unwilling to name the prejudices that had shaped his judgment. Based on what I look like, where I come from. What you thought a woman like me was capable of. Yes. The admission seemed to cost him something. I was wrong. You've demonstrated extraordinary integrity and competence. The board will, of course, require a full review of your findings. But assuming they hold up, and I believe they will, we'll need to discuss your future at this company. I'll give you the same answer I gave your son weeks ago. I don't want special treatment. I want to be judged on my work. Then you will be. He extended his hand. Welcome to Whitmore Financial, Miss Mitchell. The real Whitmore Financial. I shook his hand, feeling the surreal weight of the moment. 4 years of invisibility, of being overlooked and underestimated. And now I was standing eye to eye with the man who controlled the entire company. After Harold left, Benjamin and I stood alone in the boardroom. The afternoon light streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the marble table. You were incredible, he said softly. I was terrified. It didn't show. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. Ava, I know this isn't the time. I know we have 1,000 things to figure out. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's not about your work, or this case, or proving anything to anyone. It's about you. Just you. Your father will never accept it. Your world will never accept it. Then I'll build a new world. He took my hand. With you. I thought about my mother, working 3 jobs to give me a chance at a better life. I thought about every door that had been closed in my face, every time I'd been told to know my place. I thought about the little girl from Bed-Stuy who'd dreamed of something bigger, and I realized that she was still here inside me. She'd never left. I'm not going to be easy, I warned him. I have walls. I have wounds. I have generations of pain that you'll never fully understand. I know. And I'm not going to change who I am to fit into your world. I'm not asking you to. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed my palm. I'm asking you to let me into yours. For a long moment I didn't speak. Then slowly I smiled. Okay, I whispered. Okay. 3 months later, I stood in my new corner office on the executive floor of Whitmore Financial Partners. The nameplate on my door read Ava Mitchell, Director of Financial Compliance. It wasn't given to me. I earned it. Richard Caldwell was awaiting trial, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. The money he'd stolen had been recovered and returned to the company. Patricia Lawson had resigned shortly after the board discovered her role in covering up her brother-in-law's crimes. And Benjamin. Benjamin was in the doorway of my office holding 2 cups of coffee. Oat milk latte, no sugar, he said, setting the cup on my desk. Some things never change. Some things do. I stood and wrapped my arms around him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against mine. Your father actually smiled at me in the elevator this morning. I think I'm growing on him. Give it time. He's stubborn, but he learns. Benjamin kissed my forehead, just like his son. Outside my window, Manhattan sparkled in the afternoon light. Somewhere out there, a little girl from a place like Bed-Stuy was dreaming of something bigger. Maybe she was sitting in a classroom, invisible to her teachers. Maybe she was working her first job overlooked by her supervisors. Maybe she was lying awake at night wondering if she'd ever be seen. I wanted to tell her, you will be. Not because someone will rescue you or because the world will suddenly become fair, but because you'll rescue yourself. Because you'll take every obstacle they throw at you and turn it into a stepping stone. Because you'll be smarter and stronger and more patient than anyone ever expected. And when the moment comes, when you finally get your chance, you'll be ready. I was ready. And this was only the beginning.